we discussed a little bit about the cost and the learning process there of getting it all going. Now let's circle back on some of the benefits of owning a MIC and what that has allowed you to do. First of all, my understanding is one of the benefits of a MIC is that you can use registered funds. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to talk to you always. We've kind of gotten to know each other for the last little while through networks, both in the real estate world. You are very well known in our community as well, and we appreciate all the value that you bring to the community. You and I got on talking at the latest Keyspire Summit about fun. I myself have been going through a journey of learning more about them and how to use funds to operate a real estate business. I know you run a MIC, so I'd love for you to give a little bit of introduction of your company, what you do, and then we'll dive into some understandings about what a MIC looks like.
So I got into running a MIC a little bit by accident. I had intended to create an offering of a syndicated mortgage. And as you know, with the syndicated mortgage, there's no limit to the number of investors you can put in a syndication, but they all have equal weight and equal value. So if you're doing a syndicated mortgage, it has to all be in the same position on a secured mortgage loan. So I had about 76 investors, and I was looking to get together my syndicated mortgage and went around and talked to a few lawyers, and they couldn't kick me out of their office fast enough. So I learned from that, and sometimes I even got referrals to their least favorite person on earth. Like, go talk to this guy. I dare you. So I learned from that lawyers prefer, or anybody in the right mind prefers, a syndication of 5 people or fewer. If you are going to bring me lots of business and you're my new best friend, maybe I'll do 10. But winding up people to get paperwork done, to get the funds in place at whatever funding institution you're using, I use Olympia, to do all that sort of thing is very equivalent to nailing wind to a tree and herding cats at the same time. It's a lot of touches, it's a lot of work, and I could see why they ran away from 76 people, because I did it myself, wound up with 126 at the end of the day in this group.
Wow.
It was exhausting. Part of the reason why I wound up having to do it myself is, as an issuer, if you are doing your own solicitation and your own promotion, if you're attracting the funds and doing all the paperwork yourself, there's some severe caps on what you can accept from people in a subscription basis. In most provinces, not all, but in most provinces, you're capped around $30,000. Whereas if you go into a fund and get an EMD working for you, or a mortgage broker, EMD is the exempt market dealer, you often financial services, somebody that can advise you, and not just because they think so, but because they have the education and initials after their names to properly advise you. Then you can raise up to $100,000 in those particular provinces. So I was trying to do a $4 million raise with a $30,000 cap. That meant I was going to have a few people. It wasn't going to happen with 1 or 2 investors. So I wound up starting the MIC by accident. What happened was my lawyer came back to me, my own lawyer that I use all the time, my quarterback, and I said to him, listen, I'm not able to get a lawyer to do this for me. It had to be in BC because the project is in BC. My lawyer is in Alberta. And he said, you know what, I've called every favor I have to. They've all told me which direction to run, and none of it I want to go to. Some of them gave me a map. Like, this isn't going to work. So I've done some thinking about it, and I think we have to open a mortgage investment corporation for you. That will formalize what you're doing. So you're going to start a MIC. I said, okay, I got a MIC. We had about $2,000 an hour worth of people in the room, in the Zoom room. And I went around the room and I asked each person if they knew what they had to do, the next steps in order to make the MIC a reality and to make this investment move forward. Everybody said yes right around the clock, got back up to my lawyer and went, what the hell is a MIC?
Oh, no.
I'd never
Oh,
heard of it,
no.
no idea what was going on, but it was the only way the deal was going to be saved. So hence we moved forward. I applaud you for having the time and the foresight to do the research ahead of time, because that's going to make your life a lot easier.
So look, tell us a little bit about what a MIC is. That's a great question the lawyer asked. I feel like a lot of people have the same question.
I had never heard of one before. Most people have heard of a REIT. A REIT is a fund that manages multiple bricks and sticks. So you have apartment buildings, you have residential properties, whatever, you put them all into a group. The profits that these assets make are profit shared back to the investors. A MIC is the exact opposite side of that coin. I put out mortgages on those properties, and the profits that we make from the mortgages are shared back to our investors. I can't own land. I'm very restricted to how much land I can own. I can't run properties within the MIC. I put out mortgages. MICs put out properties, or MICs put out mortgages, REITs put out properties. Same thing otherwise.
So then a MIC being a mortgage investment corporation, is that correct?
Correct. Yep. So we profit share the interest earned back to our shareholder investors. Our shareholders have preferred shares in the corporation, which means they can't vote. But if anything goes wrong, they're first one in dibs to get the money. I stand at the back of the line.
And what kind of mortgages do you do within your corporation?
So I have two different funds. My first fund is more conservative. It runs pretty much like a traditional bank. The investor has to come, or the person to borrow funds has to come in with 20% down payment. It can't be borrowed. Working in an area that has good potential. So if it's a declining market, I'm not quite as interested in going right up to 80% loan to value. We offer that at 12%, and there's a lender's fee as well. In the second fund, it's a little bit more aggressive. I'm targeting people doing land development or buying larger multifamily buildings in that fund, but flippers use it too. In that fund, I'll go up to 100% of the acquisition value or 65% of the after repair value. And the rate on that one is 15%. And we also have a lender's fee on that one.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the process of getting this MIC started. So after having these wonderful lawyers that still needed to figure out what to do there, what did that process look like? How long did it take you? How did all the, your current investors get involved in it? And what's the cost behind some of these processes?
So the one I think that amused me the most was the cost. Of course, that's the first question I asked this lawyer too. Okay, let's do a MIC. What's it cost? He said, about $75,000 to set up a MIC, 50 to 75. I went, okay, that's a lot of money, but this project that we're doing is, $4 million, and we're looking at having about $20 million worth of asset at the end of the day here. It's worth it. It's worth it. What I didn't understand, and what most people probably wouldn't understand, is not all the costs come from the lawyer. There's other more expensive lawyers involved. There's accountants involved. There's auditors involved. So whatever quote you get from your main lawyer, he's only looking at his own numbers, double that. You're going to have double the expenses coming from other areas. So at the end of the day, I was about $160,000 to open up the MIC, which was certainly more than I expected. Those are all upfront costs, but still worth it. Part of the reason why my cost might be a little bit more than yours, I had a few different things going on in my MIC that would be different than many people. I was absolutely insistent that I be available to as many provinces as possible. So my MIC is written, but it can work with every single province across Canada. That increases cost. I did not want to restrict myself to only accredited investors or friends, family, and close business relationships. I wanted to be open for eligible investors as well. So in order to do that, it meant I had to create an offering memorandum. Offering memorandums are their own frickin' beast. They are just bleed money, and your offering memorandum will be fine. It's an ongoing process. So I understood at the beginning, create an offering memorandum. When you're done, we're all good. Turns out that the offering memorandum has to be updated at the end of every single fiscal year. And if anybody from any securities commission anywhere in Canada happens to read it and say, you know what, I don't particularly like this, take it down and tweak it a bit for me, will you? You have to do that because there is no God beyond security gods. That's it. That's the end of the line. There's nowhere you can go after them. So I've had to do that as well.
So
Picture about the 20 to 50,000 per offering memorandum edit.
how many do you have?
I have one offering memorandum, but it's been edited year end again, midterm, 4 times.
My God.
In 2 years.
Like somewhere between 150 to 200K and just editing and revising this OM.
Want to run one?
Wow.
You just bleed money. Yeah, it's fun. And then of course you have other expenses as well. So I use an EMD. I'm not legal and licensed for securities, nor do I have all the initials at the end of my name to properly advise people. So I use Atlas One Digital Securities is my EMD, and they vet the investors coming in to make sure they're eligible or accredited and that my MIC is proper for their portfolio. And sometimes I send them people who are all excited about investing and they say, no, this does not look good for your portfolio. So they're a good, really good resource to have, but I call them the salespeople that don't sell.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they're more the returns department.
So I guess they like play the role of compliance here, right?
They super do. They ensure that I'm compliant and that all my investors are compliant, that the OM and everything about my business is compliant. In fact, I'm just going through another due diligence with them. So annually we do due diligence with them. And of course they charge a due diligence fee. Everybody has fees. fees.
So we discussed a little bit about the cost and the learning process there of getting it all going. Now let's circle back on some of the benefits of owning a MIC and what that has allowed you to do. First of all, my understanding is one of the benefits of a MIC is that you can use registered funds.
Absolutely. In fact, I normally tell people it's advisable to use registered funds. If you're thinking of doing an investment in any exempt market security, in any fund whatsoever, like a MIC, a REIT, an MFT, whatever, you should look into what the redemption policy is. So my redemption policy is investors come in and they can ask for their money back at any time, but there's a penalty for doing so before 36 months. So we have a declining penalty over the first 3 years, and after 3 years, money back, no penalty whatsoever. But look into that when you're doing the investment. So if you're doing an investment and it's tucked away and your funds are basically not liquid for 3 years, I don't recommend using cash. I mean, you can if you know that it's going to be tucked away for a while, but it really is more appropriate for RSPs, TFSAs, stuff like that, that you know is going to be tucked away for a while and you're not going to be accessing it.
So I know I had asked you this question before when we spoke a while back, and I'm going to circle back because I'm not sure if you're going to have a different answer for me, but I'm curious to know if you can use a MIC towards a equity share on a multifamily building as opposed to a mortgage product, if you would commit as like an LP on the equity side.
Absolutely not. We are a mortgage investment corporation. So as a mortgage investment corporation, I have to put a mortgage on a property. Now, it could be possible that another one of my companies comes in an equity position and the mortgage company provides the mortgage to that particular project, but I have to wear 2 separate hats in that case. So I'm doing that right now with our Sweet Oasis Homes deal, the Nixon Rise project, where we're doing that major land development. I'm on the Sweet Oasis Homes team, and I'm also the mortgage. So when I'm talking the mortgage, I have to put on the mortgage hat and make sure that my investors in the mortgage corporation are getting the returns that I intend, that I'm able to. I can't just discount interest. It is what it is. So that has to be known going in. And then on the other side, of course, I'm concerned about when payouts happen and making sure a mortgage gets paid, just like you would be with any bank. So, I have lots of hats.
So
and for that reason, primarily do not fund my own projects. It has to be pretty exciting before I would consider funding it, because it's just easier to keep that arm's length.
Just separate, yes.
Yeah.
What's the average return for your investors? You talked about what you charge on the mortgage side. What's the average return that investors see from the MIC, and how often does that get paid out?
Yeah, so you heard about all the fees. So despite my high interest rates, my returns are running in the more conservative one between 6 and 8%, in the more aggressive one between 8 and 10%. In both cases, I'm attempting to drive that up by 2%. So I'm trying to get the conservative one to a consistent 10 and the more aggressive one to a consistent 12. Both of them are going to take time. I need to be able to build up the purse so that I have continuously cycling larger value mortgages than, of course, you are at the very beginning.
So how long have you had the MIC for?
So if we just count Sweet Oasis Homes, that started in December 2020. If we count when I started to bring in other investors, that happened a year later, so 2021. So we're not too far in yet. Still pretty young.
Very exciting though. So one of the questions that I have about funds in general, and I'll ask that about the MIC, is from the moment, let's say you decided you're going to start a MIC. In your case, it sounds like you already had the investors all lined up to get going. I wonder how it played out on your second fund. Because my question is, let's say we decided to start a fund, we've given it like a price and say we're going to have a fund of about $5 million here. It's going to be investing in multifamily. And you start raising the money. What happens to that first few hundreds of thousands that are in the fund, but it's not invested yet? How long do you have before you need to start giving investors returns? So yes, that's the question.
How patient are your investors? How much do they understand about this being new? It's a balancing act, because you do have all these expenses that you're trying to pay. At the same time, you're needing to give your investors a return, or they're going to say, "Heck with the discount, I need my money back." Right? So in my case, I was lucky. I was able to put out a couple of very small value mortgages to start generating at least a little bit of profit while the purse was growing. But it's a balancing act. It really is. The sooner you can start doing some returns, the better. So in my case, I have a related party. One of my other businesses is funding a lot of the expenses, and we make loan payments back to the other business, and we keep paying the investors. So you just got to walk that line. You got to find a way to carry some of those funds at the beginning. I find it's a very slow process, and I had forgotten that that it would take a while. So when you go out and ask, you might have 100 people interested, but you're probably only going to get about 5 to 10 at most coming in within the first month or two. The rest, it's not that they're not ready to go, but their funds aren't back yet. so when their funds come back, they'll come back and they may look again, but it just takes time.
I do suffer from impatience sometimes.
Right? Me too.
Yeah. And then how often do the returns go to the investors? Is it a monthly return? Is it a quarterly return?
You disclose that in your OM. So you're the person that will make that decision as to how the returns are done. My OM says quarterly distributions. I also have set up DRIP. DRIP is dividend reinvestment program. So because most people are using RSPs, they don't really want the little bits of money going back into their RSP account. So they're allowed to reinvest that into shares if they wish. If they don't wish and they want the income to come back out, that's fine. They can do that as well. And we also, after the initial investment, we allow investors to come in and top up with as little as $1,000 per top up, as frequently as monthly. So I'm strong advocate for diversification. I don't put all my money into my MIC. I certainly don't expect you to. So if you have other investments that are returning a little bit here and a little bit there, I know some of my mortgage products that I put out do that out of my own personal account. It's a handy way to be able to top pop up. It was specifically designed for people doing the Smith maneuver, but I don't have anybody doing the Smith maneuver doing it. So
Oh,
it's all other people.
interesting.
I've had the Smith people on my mind to talk to for a bit now. I just, those round tuits are hard to find. They're all sold out at the stores.
I guess I feel like some investors may need additional education on what doing the Smith maneuver would look like, right? For them to get involved in that. I do have a good accountant that's certified on the Smith maneuver. If you ever want to contact, I'm sure you know people. But I'm glad to connect.
I've been talking to Robson about it, but I haven't followed up with him since the new release. And it's not so much the Smith maneuver I think I need to talk to people about. It's educating them on what a MIC is, because most don't understand that. As well, frankly, my returns are low compared to what they can get in some other investments like REITs, like straight up doing their own mortgages or some other things that they can get into, equity plays. My returns sound low. The difference is looking at things through a risk lens. So the amount of risk on mortgages, especially a pool of mortgages, is significantly lower than risk on buildings, which is because I'm secured to the building and to the borrower and to anything that company may purchase in the future, not just that one building or 3 buildings, whatever is in that particular product. So it really is all risk-based. Returns are risk-based, but because of that, I get lower returns.
I appreciate that conversation because ultimately diversification is so important. It's also important to have your portfolio kind of spread out into lower to higher risk types of investments. And like you said, diversified in different companies too, and areas. So you really are keeping yourself as low risk as you can with your overall portfolio of investments. Part of the reason why I am interested in the fund model is to be able to do that for investors, because right now we do a per project basis.
Yes.
If we can create a pool and invest in a number of different buildings in the city,
so much better for your investors.
Yes, it's going to diversify everybody in a much better way.
Exactly.
So definitely interested. One of the reasons why I'm interested in looking at the funds model on money to be able to fund our multifamily acquisitions and operations.
So one of the things that I didn't know going in, every time you do a closing, I assume you're going to do like me in multiple closings. You're not going to raise the whole amount and say I'm done. It's going to be an ongoing thing. You're going to have to do an upload to CDAR. CDAR is the Centralized Securities Registry. So your offering memorandum and any marketing materials you use are on file with CDAR. And then every time you do a closing, you have to disclose to them how much of closing you did and what parameters, and make sure that all your investors met the criteria. And all that gets uploaded, and that is accessible by anybody that has the proper initials after the end of their name. Anybody in securities, anybody can pull it down and read it anytime if they're in securities. Otherwise, it's kept pretty confidential. The other thing I didn't realize was that you had to do an audit every year. So not only do you have your books done by your bookkeeper, and then your accountant does all the statements, then your accountant's work has to get audited annually. And that's a process. I always thought an audit really focused in on the numbers, and they do. They look at the paperwork, of course, but they ask so many other questions. It is the most painful process. And the audits that I do anyway have 3 tiers. So they start with the junior auditor who asks the most questions, then the intermediate auditor, and then the third set of eyes is the senior auditor. Each one asks the same questions in different words. Each one collects the same documents. They do not share the documents between each other. So you just spend your life sending them. Sorry, family filters on, I can't get the word out. So April is, don't talk to me in April. I'm not a pleasant person. I hate April.
So first of all, is this your full-time gig? Is this what you do full-time?
I'm a real estate investor full-time. I have 11 other corporations, so there's quite a few things to keep me busy.
Yep, that sounds busy. And we had talked about the profitability of running a MIC. And I had asked you, like, how do you make money? And your answer was, I haven't yet.
Yeah, I'll let you know. From all my analysis, we're looking at about 8 to 10 million in the fund before I'm hitting my, well, about 7.5 to 8 before I'm breaking even, about 10 million before Mama actually starts to see any income out of it.
And what's your projection to hit that 10 million?
Well, I was stupidly thought I could do that in about a year. Nowhere near it. Yeah, I'm at about, I just did a closing, so I'd have to relook at the numbers, but I'm maybe a quarter of the way there now.
And what are some of the ways that you're, getting your make out there to attract new investors?
So that's another balancing act. You have to be a little bit careful. So Atlas One, my EMD, has all the rights and privileges to advertise and push as much as they want. And they do, but I have to be a little bit more careful. I can explain to people what a MIC is, and I can tell them what it is that I do and how I do it. I can have this conversation with you, but I can't actually say, hey, Adriana, do you want to come invest in my MIC? I can't do that. I have to just put it out there that it's available. And if anybody wants to talk to me about it, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. I can tell you right now, if you're asking any questions beyond how does a MIC operate, I'm sending you over to Atlas One. My EMD representative will take care of all of that stuff, because I don't need to know how much you're investing or what you got in your portfolio. I don't need to know that till after you've made the commitment and decided it's right for you.
Makes sense. So what has putting this MIG together been able to do for your portfolio and your real estate growth?
It feels like I pulled up my big girl panties. I'm I'm up in the players area now with this MIG. It's a growing, so I'm I'm a teenager maybe. But I definitely feel like I've elevated my game. I've learned a whole lot about projections and fund management and just due diligence. So I thought I was doing due diligence before. When it's other people's money, that's a whole new level of due diligence. You're a lot more careful with other people's funds. Just organization processes, just everything has elevated. And because of that, I now set that standard for my other 11 corporations. So they've all elevated and benefited because of the additional work and processes and knowledge that I've learned through the MIC.
So ultimately you're saying the self-development piece of it all and the growth, your own personal growth and expansion has really greatly impacted your business overall.
Absolutely. Not only other people's perception of myself and my corporations, but my perception of myself and my corporations. So I'm starting to accept the fact that maybe I am a full-time real estate investor running mega million corporations, dollar corporations, as opposed to I'm retired. This is what retirement looks like on me.
So what does that look like future-wise? What is an exit strategy on a MIC? What would be your exit strategy on a MIC? How long would you plan to be running for, and what does it look like to exit out of it?
I don't intend to exit out of it. I will keep this right through to my estate. However, I am currently working with a girl who does a lot of the administration and a lot of the office side of the work for me. And as we grow, more staff will come in. I will eventually be managing the manager.
Got it. What does it look like to collapse a fund? Do you know much about that?
I don't, because I haven't had to do that. I do know that everybody's got to get paid back.
Yeah.
And there are certain orders. So in my share systems, I've got A class, B class, C class, and D class. It's C and D that I'm talking about primarily with you, because A and B are in Nix and Rise. But I can't just willy-nilly pay back people when I want to pay back people. You have to get rid of all of A's first. They are first priority, then all of B's, then all of C's, then all of D's. And it's just part of the way it works.
Yeah, because that's just one of my personal questions in terms of going down that direction. Because I've heard once you have the machine running, then now you got to keep it going and keep feeding it. Money and projects. And, there's a side of me that wonders, what if I want to retire in 10 years and be done with it? What does that look like? So
I highly recommend you start training a mentee to do money and projects. And
So
start
it's
them,
not going anywhere. Once it started, we're
Start
gonna keep going.
yeah, start them 3 to 5 people before you're ready, 3 to 5 years before you're ready to exit. So that you have plenty of time to make sure that they're well versed and that they represent your brand well. Heaven help me if I get somebody in here who hates purple. I mean, that just won't work for me.
You're out. What's your favorite color? Not purple? Out.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be your favorite, but it will be.
I love that. I truly believe that, you know, I felt the same different ways. Obviously, we just finalized we went the GPLP route. So we brought in quite a few investors on our latest, you know, larger multifamily acquisition, and a very exciting project. And I felt like we've had to level up significantly as well. And I appreciate that component of it because it's really about the journey. It's really about who you're becoming as you're pursuing these different goals and expanding yourself. And that's what I love about real estate. It's this continuous opportunity to grow and expand and learn, and face challenges, difficulties and struggles and money and all of it.
I do find it interesting because most of us do start doing our own investing on our own. And I know my first few purchases, I was a little surprised at the legal costs. Now I just laugh. And then some of us move into JVs if we want to keep growing, and there's some legal expense involved in JVs. And that first JV deal you do, you look at the bill for the agreement, it's kind of like, oh, okay, that was interesting. And then, but it's worth it, and you keep going. And then the GPLP, that's a whole nother level. And once you start doing these funds, yeah, you really do feel like you're getting there. I'm not sure what's beyond a fund. Probably going
It's a good question.
probably going public.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to take that step, but I'm not going to say never, because I never would have thought I'd run a MIC. Well, for one, I didn't know what it was. Never heard of it.
So good. So we talked about also the different kinds, like you were giving me a little bit of a lesson of the different ones out there. So, you know, MIC being the mortgage investment corporation. You had mentioned there's a couple of different kinds of funds, the REITs, which are, as you just said earlier, they're supposed to be investing in real assets only.
Yeah, and then there's an MFT. So some companies like to do an MFT.
What's an MFT again?
It's a mutual fund trust. I toyed with that probably back 2018, 2019, considered setting one up. And what frightened me about an MFT, you can do whatever you want. You can invest in real estate, you can invest in oranges. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want as long as you disclose it in your offering memorandum and make people aware that this is what your fund is doing. So if you're doing a land development project and you're doing some apartment builds and you're operating some rent homes, something like just all sorts of different strategies, you could bundle all of that into an MFT and sell shares in your MFT to investors and provide returns that way. What scared me about an MFT was the requirement to have 150 unique investors at all times or the fund collapses. And whenever you open that, you have till the end of February in the subsequent year to achieve that number. Live 1 year.
Depends when you open again.
If you open it now, you've got not 1 year. November, December, January, February, you got 4 months.
You have to open like February. Until the next February.
And then you've got a year. Yeah. So it can be a daunting process. The good news is you get to set your share value. So if you set your share value at 100 or at $1, do you have 150 friends? They'd send you $1. There's ways to make it happen. It's probably the most expensive to set up and keep running because of the diversification allowed within it and the flexibility allowed within it. But it can be, it's very good for people that have diverse strategies that want to incorporate multiple strategies in. Whereas the REIT is just buildings and the MIC is just private lending mortgages.
I spoke with somebody yesterday and they talked about a venture capital fund. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah, so that would be pulling in people for investing in a new business generally. I don't know as much about how that works, so I won't speak to that, but I have heard of it. There's crowdfunding and all that sort of thing that can happen as well. Just none of those seem to apply to anything I'm doing.
Sure. Yeah. And as I told you, I'm just on this learning journey of what it all entails and what's sort of the best. We are um, very specialized in the multifamily space. I'm not really planning to go into any other asset classes at the moment. We may potentially start expanding into commercial side more in the sense of like retail, some plazas, in that sense, but same kind of model in terms of buy and hold, add value adds, good operations, and then, holding it for the longer term.
All of that can be disclosed in your offering memorandum. So my offering memorandum says that I do residential mortgages primarily, but I can also do commercial mortgages. It says I can do promissory notes, but I don't. Like, no, not out of the MIC, not with your money.
Probably a good policy to have.
I did intentionally make my offering memorandum a little bit more inclusive than my actual practices. So the offering memorandum says I can do this, and I restrict myself to that.
And
Just
do
you
you,
never
so you
know.
do you set up on your OM right off the bat a number that the fund is gonna be up to a certain amount of dollars, or it's infinite? You can keep raising, it could eventually be $100 million in there. Do you have to decide that at the moment of setup or no? Okay.
No. Nope. Now that question was asked to me by the MD. He wanted to know how much he's targeting to raise. So I did give him a number, but that's not in my OM.
How much has the EMD helped you with the raise?
I really like their organization and their portal and their accessibility for my investors. They have a whole lot of information. They haven't brought me too many people. That said, they are a growing company as well. I specifically picked them over many others because of their software that they offer. I'm very much technology based in my corporations. Everything's online. I would like to say paperless, but the Canada Post seems to feel differently. But for the most part, I'm paperless, and they are too. So I really like that about them. Their Rolodex maybe not as big as some of the longer established firms out there, but I'm willing to grow with them.
Yeah, I've met George. He's great.
George. Yeah. My rep is Ryan. He's also really great. Some of the things about working with an EMD that really surprised me is you basically got a marketing department on your hands. So I put together a little presentation that I was going to do, sent it over to them because he said he wanted to see it. I thought, what the hell are you poking into my business for? Next thing I know, this whole professional thing comes back. And when I looked really closely, yeah, that is what I said. But wow, I didn't know it was that good. Yeah, so
I love that. They also do their own due diligence too, right?
Yeah,
and that really just strengthens your numbers and your proposition to investors, which is amazing.
Well, it's another step down that line, right? So you know your projects inside out and backwards. Now you're asking somebody else to basically sell it for you. They have to make sure their reputation is on the line. They have to make sure you're legitimate and feel comfortable with the product they're representing. So yeah, they do have a fair bit of due diligence. I didn't know. I thought that was a one-time only fee. It's an annual fee. They do that every year.
So as kind of like our last wrapping up questions, one is, would you do this again, or do you recommend people getting into the fund world?
So I'm going to say yes, because there's absolutely no way I could have figured out how to do the Nixon Rise project without doing this. The Nixon Rise project was my driver. Would I have opened up C and D knowing how much work now it was going to be? I would have probably thought a little bit longer, but I think I would have done it. It's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. It's a lot more. And in my other corporations where I also sometimes raise money, all the decisions are my own to make. When I report, what I report, how I report it, all that's my own to make. When you do something formal, like a MIC, a REIT, an MFT, a lot more of that is required in order to keep it. I'm not saying that I wouldn't meet or exceed those requirements, but it's different when somebody tells you you have to compared to you deciding you want to. It feels different.
Makes sense. And what is the future looking like for you?
Every time I think I'm done, somebody else comes along with a great business proposition and here we grow again. I don't know. I think I'm going to be bringing in some more staff. I have 3 right now, and the poor girls are working their butts off. So I think we're going to need some more help. I am definitely looking for some more accounting support, and with a MIC, it has to be not notice to reader like every accountant does. It has to be IFRS, International Federal blah, 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 International Accounting Standards, IFRS. So I am looking for somebody that has those criteria to help me with some of the MIC work, and then of course all my other quirks too.
So yeah, scaling, hiring, building that team, that's so crucial to take your time back, but also to keep running, right? You need that.
That was another learning lesson. So I always thought, yeah, okay, bring in people and get my time back. Not so much. You bring in people, your time commitments change. Now I'm managing what they're doing. So yes, I get a lot more done because there's 4 of us doing it now, not just me. But a lot of my time now is spent watching them do it, or make sure that they do it correctly, or training them to do it, or checking that, just answering questions.
A good point. That's a good point. I guess it's more about where you focus your time in terms of, focusing on like higher revenue, tasks, incoming producing tasks, and also where you enjoy and when you want to spend your time versus, other things that are not as fun to get done or doesn't bring as much of a value proposition to the business.
I spend a lot of my time on Zoom. I open up 4 to 6 hours per day of meetings, and I'm not giving that up. So everything else has to work around that. I love the networking component. I love helping newer investors figure out how to diversify. I enjoy talking about real estate projects and what you're into. I love hearing about your projects. That's an important part of my day, and I put a lot of time and effort into that. So we do. When people say they don't have time to do something, I call BS. It just isn't on the top end of the list.
It's not priority. I agree. Yeah. I agree with that. For those that are like me, that are looking to get started on the fund world, what would be your advice on how to get started? What would be my first couple steps here?
One of the big ones was getting structured advice. So, and you don't want to go to just any regular lawyer for structured advice. You want to go to a tax specialist corporate lawyer to get advice on what is the best way to set things up and to start this MIC. And if the projects or REIT or MFT, if the projects you're doing would be suitable for that. At the end of the day, in order to accept registered funds, it is this person who's going to have to write a letter saying that, in their opinion, this is an investment that qualifies to be able to accept registered funds. So you might as well have that conversation up front before you start spending all the big dollars. That conversation I had with that guy, I only spent an hour with him, and it was a $15,000 bill. But my lawyers apparently spent about 10 hours with them as well. So they are expensive, but they are well worth it. Having that conversation alone and the way we've structured for the MIC has probably saved me $3 million in taxes. So I'll spend $1,500 to save $3 million.
Or 15. That's good return on your investment right there.
It's not a bad ROI. Yeah. The sad part is you have to pay that up front before you see the $3 million. But
usually the case. You put money out and then you receive returns at some point. Yeah,
exactly. So we're getting to that point now. I've just recently done my first distribution, so that part feels good. Wasn't as much as I would have liked to have distributed, but the other thing that I like about the way the MIC operates is we have the ability to determine how much of the profits that we distribute each time. So I deliberately kept it low this time, not knowing exactly what bills were going to be coming up in Q2 and Q3 and Q4. But then at the end of the year, in order to maintain mixed status, we can have no profits. So you top up and bump up your distributions for that final distribution of the year.
That's exciting. It's
Yeah.
sending investor returns is also one of my favorite times.
I love it.
I'm always in a good mood that day. I'm like,
Always.
yes. I'm checking to make
Yeah.
sure they've accepted, you know. Like, so-
Oh, I do mine through electronic fund transfer, so it's like a direct deposit into their bank accounts.
Automatic,
But I
yeah,
have
we're
to
not
check off each name that I'm sending the funds to, and everyone I go through. Oh yeah, I remember that story. We met on this and we did that. Oh yeah, this one. Oh, this one was planning a trip. I wonder if they booked it yet. Like you're so into it. It's so much fun. That's the best part.
I 100% agree with that. I feel the exact same. So amazing. It's been such a pleasure, Laurie. It always is. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge about this. I'm sure we're going to be circling back to some future conversations on this as well. I will give people your contact information to reach out if they have their own, questions. They want to touch base with you about MIC and what you do. And yeah, I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon as well.
I've made contact pretty easy. It's lauriemay.ca is my website. So as long as you can spell Laurie May, Lauriemay, you'll find me.
Fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
Wish
much,
you
Adrienne. I
really
appreciate it.
wonderful luck and all the success always.